What's up, everybody? It is the post-game edition of Purple Update Live. The Vikings topped the Chargers in a crazy game that almost fully encompassed what it's like to be a Vikings fan emotionally. I always have a really fun time live chatting with you guys, and then also chatting with you, obviously, during the pregame and the halftime show, just to see the pure just roller coaster of fire Zimmer, Rhodes is trash. Going to man. Diggs is frustrating this season with his drops, to him redeeming himself, to Hughes potentially also redeeming himself. And it was just a really, really good game. It was a statement game, but not really in the way that I think any of us wanted or expected. It wasn't all positive. It wasn't as big of, strangely enough, it wasn't as big of a blowout in terms of growth. And at this point of the season, the things that we're looking at as writers and fans, you guys, if you're watching the show, you're a pretty like level 12 Sigma Vikings fan, and I think you guys know how I feel about where the team is and what the expectations are and where they need to be. I didn't necessarily feel better about this game. Things got out of hand late. There were a lot of turnovers, but for the most part, there was a lot of bend and not breaking. The secondary played bad. I would argue this was collectively one of the worst performances by the secondary this season, and that's saying a lot, and maybe I'll get murdered for that. But in reality, Mike Hughes is a mixed bag of amazing plays, offset by maybe a 3 to 4 ratio to 1 amazing play, bad plays. I understand that I'm sure Zimmer has him playing off the ball a lot, off the line. He did that with Trey Waynes. I know it always used to kind of perplex me back then, because people would always say, look at Waynes, he's like 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, what a pussy. Zimmer would not just allow a rookie or anybody to just line up wherever they want. It doesn't work that way. He's clearly broadcasting that he doesn't want Hughes to get beat over the top, and he would rather that he acclimate himself by playing maybe 3-4 yards off, or 5 yards in some instances, and tackling and keeping everything in front of him. I think that Zimmer has enough faith in the rest of the defense, whether it's based on reality or not, to bend and not break. And they did a lot of that. I think if I was handing out game balls for this game, obviously Boone would get one, because he hasn't had a lot of experience outside of the preseason, and he had this huge day. He probably won some grandma or grandpa who had $1 left on daily fantasy and just picked up Boone for the hell of it. Probably won them $1 million. So he deserves a game ball for that. But also, Eric Kendricks was on fire in this game. I thought he played spectacularly. I don't think he gets a lot of credit. You don't hear about him a lot when talking to, and I don't want to get VWO here and claim like there's levels of fans and some fans are better than others. I just mean that, again, when you're watching a show like this, it's relatively deep down into the rabbit hole of Vikings media. So, a lot if you're watching the show, is my point. And because of that, you just hear a lot of this narratives and what people are thinking from a fan standpoint. I've talked about how I like to use that for ideas for articles, and you just hear a lot about the regular defensive players that people elevate to this elite status as fans. And I'm not saying that people don't throw Kendricks into that a lot, but you hear more about like Danielle Hunter. Obviously, it's funny, those word they like analyze like your podcast, and they say these are all the words that you use, and some are bigger, some are smaller, and they're all over the place, and it kind of shows you how many words have been used on a podcast or by people chatting on your website, and it kind of gives you an idea as to what topics are being talked about more or less. Obviously, the secondary is a big part of that, and because of that, it's overshadowed a lot of things. But the front seven today, I thought, played perhaps their best game, at least since the offense started really churning out good elite numbers week 5. There was a big discrepancy between pressures and hits, and those pressures even kind of screwing up the internal clock of the opposing quarterback. A lot of the quarterbacks were just stepping up into the pocket, and there was no interior pressure or linebacker pressure, so they just would get rid of the ball quickly because the secondary was not covering people very well. I felt like Rivers, and it's a really good sign. I mean, he is very statuesque, and he has been playing up and down. He's at the end of his career, but I think the fact that they did get to him was a really good sign, and something to be encouraged about moving forward into the playoffs, because at this point, I'll be completely honest with you guys, I don't think that the secondary is going to really resemble anything that we want it to, or we expected it to, or that it used to be last season even. Hughes just doesn't have enough experience, and he can't physically make up for that lack of experience because he doesn't have the size. Mackenzie Alexander, this was like his Seahawks game. How Rhodes played in the Seahawks game. He played awful in the first half, especially. So I don't want to get too, look at the score and say, wow, they blew him out, gave up 10 points. They scored 39 points. What are you complaining about? What are you talking about? They gave up 10 points. You guys saw the game. It was just, they got really, really lucky. In a lot of instances, they got a lot of turnovers, which they earned, but I'm just saying, like, we're not used to that happening. I said something in the live chat, and I forget what the statement was by the announcer, by Trent Green, but it was like, man, this everything seems to be going wrong for the Chargers. And I said, I finally heard that about the opposing team and not the Vikings. They had a meltdown. Especially with what, like a minute left in the half, and then in the second half, it was that entire period was like the Vikings' third quarter against the Seahawks. It was just everybody was screwing up. Melvin Gordon, Rivers obviously imploded. But that's not a sustainable way to win. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to happen next week. And they were neck and neck up until that point. This is the first game the Chargers lost by a more than one score. But it was just a complete meltdown. And while the team does deserve credit for that, that's also a Chargers issue. You know what I mean? The Vikings did not solely, through their prowess, create the situation where Melvin Gordon, who's an amazing running back, fumbles. Rivers, who came off of a game last week with 314 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's an up and down team. That's why they're 5-8 or 5-9 now, and not the other way around. And so again, they do deserve credit, but we haven't seen something like this elsewhere this season. So it's not like it happened again. Like the Bears last season, for example. It wasn't something that I expect to see. I would love to see it against the Packers. I could die happy if that happened next week. But I'm just saying it's not a sustainable way to win. Outside of that, I thought Cousins played well. Maybe it's debatable, but from what I saw from everybody in the chat, that interception wasn't on him. It was on Riley Reef. I don't know what he was doing on that play. I'm also. I'll get back into Cousins in a second, but I mean, obviously the main storyline coming out of the game after I got done venting about the defense is Dalvin Cook's injury, and I could be completely wrong about this, so bear with me, but it's going to be a short tirade. I don't want to be too wordy here. For once. Thielen injured his hammy. He, from what I've heard from sources near or in the team, he probably was the impetus for him coming back too early. Like he could have lied or thought he was better than he was health wise. With hamstrings, it's really hard to tell. A lot of these injuries are hard to tell. Some are more of a pain tolerance issue. Some can flare up like a hammy. He came back too early. He left after one series. After that, Dalvin got injured in the Seahawks game. He was injured that week, but it flared up on that fumble. He said after the game, though, I'm going to play on Sunday. Zimmer said, okay, pump the brakes. We're only going to play our players when they're healthy, which to me was an admission that maybe Thielen came back too early. But all the reports were it's a pain management issue for Cook, and I think Cook's exact quote was, "It can't get any worse. It just hurts." I'm paraphrasing, it just hurts, but he literally said it can't get any more injured. If that's the accurate information he had, and I'm not a doctor, clearly, that just bothers me. And I know Eric Sugarman is the class of the NFL in regards to what he does, and they have really great doctors, and I think they go to TRIA. But for it to be a shoulder, not the chest, maybe they're not exactly the same thing. But if he's out for any significant amount of time, or potentially the playoffs, that's awful, and they need to do a review as to why he was allowed to play if on a relatively routine tackle that injury happened when they knew he had a significant injury in the first place. It's just, yeah, it's way too important, and it's way too fucking Vikings for if he's out for any significant amount of time. And I've been waiting to toss this topic out during the week, which I'm going to do this week. But there's been a lot of people talking about, well, what are you going to do with Cook and Cousins contracts both coming up at the same time? And I might have an unpopular take on this, but I would rather obviously have Cousins if it was a binary thing and you could only have one, for a couple of reasons. One being, again, we can never get consistent quarterback play. The history of this team has shown that. We've had a lot of good running backs, though. We also have Alexander Madison behind Cook, who's like Cook light. We don't have a version of Cousins behind Cousins. But also, Dalvin gets hurt, and that's not a slight against him. That's not something he can control. For the most part, I think he does everything right in regards to weightlifting, and obviously the dude's jacked. So you have to take that into consideration, and how these touches are gonna keep adding up. I mean, every season there's something. So maybe I'm just freaking out. Maybe he'll be fine. I didn't have a chance to really look at what the post game stuff was. If you guys have anything that you've seen, if you Googled it, Randy or Tang, let me know. If you're new to the show, you can always just jump into the conversation and let me know if you have any questions about the game or comments or anything like that. But I mean, it was fun to watch for the most part. I mean, I think the secondary is. I mean, if the front seven can continue to play like this. And I give credit where credit's due in regards to the scheming that was done to have the front seven take advantage of the talent that they have. I mean, it's a little ridiculous that there wasn't more of this season, to be honest. I mean, there's just so much talent on this defense that you would expect to see things like this more often, especially when the Vikings were playing quote-unquote bad teams, when Cousins was putting up all the numbers and everyone's saying, well, these teams are horrible. We still didn't see a lot of dominant performances from this defense. We saw a lot of bending and increasing breaking. I think that from an eye test standpoint, and I'm going to rewatch the game, Zimmer's game plan was a lot more aggressive this go around, and it might not have seemed that way to most people, but like, even I know this was a Stefanski and Kubiak thing, but even having like the flea flicker, which is so strange because Tang and I talked about that, and Randy, I think you were there. We talked about it on Saturday or Friday. What my thoughts were on gimmick plays, and I said I would love to see like flea flickers. And having a guy like Dalvin Cook involved, the defense kind of has to be like, oh shit, Dalvin's got the ball. It's almost involuntary at this point, and that opens things up. Granted, it didn't work, but I liked it. I do agree with the cliche or what people say about Zimmer, about him playing not to lose and being really conservative. Um, I but it's also really hard to tell because of just how crazy that second half was and how insanely bad Rivers played. It got to the point where, I mean, I said this at halftime. I'm worried about Tyrod Taylor coming in because he's a mobile quarterback, and that could not work out too well for the Vikings. That didn't happen. I'm sure out of respect. I'm sure Rivers is done after this season. But I'm not going to be mad that the Vikings won. They're keeping up with all the other teams in the NFC. They got the Packers next Monday night. They should win that game. They should win the next three. Maybe they have to. Who knows? I didn't see the outcome of the Rams Cowboys. If anyone could update me on that. There's a new person. Ooh, let's not scare him away like Lenny from Of Mice and Men and pet him too hard. Philip Rivers is trash. And he's happy not to be a Chargers fan because of the season they're having, or a bungle. Says Tang. Bada bing, bada boon. I like that. I'm horrible at nicknames. Yeah, my cat's name is Kitty, so that should tell you what I know. But yeah, 30 unanswered points. I mean, I don't remember seeing a second half of football that insanely bad. There are a couple other things I wanted to talk about again, just going back into the game that Cousins had. I thought it was further just proof. I mean, it wasn't flashy, but he got the job done. You know what I mean? And that's just something that I think can be overlooked. And I hate to keep harping on my love for Cousins, but I mean, he's just been consistent. He hasn't regressed like a lot of people, myself included, were afraid he might do. He feels incredibly comfortable, I think, in this offense. And they rolled out some new wrinkles tonight that I didn't hate, like the too cute stuff we talk about almost every single day. But he is playing well, and if we could get the secondary figured out, this team could really do something. And it's just really extremely disappointing to not only see Rhodes, who's got injured, and then Hughes is out there. He's not playing great. And then, like I said earlier, Mackenzie Alexander having just a horrible first half, especially. He's a second round pick. Hughes is a first round pick. At some point, these guys need to come through. I mean, we've sacrificed a lot to invest in the secondary. I don't think anyone has on paper as many first round or second round picks in the cornerback position that we do, or the talent, just with even a guy like Holton Hill or Chris Boyd. You could throw Curse in there. I don't understand it. I know Curse wasn't playing today, but he needs to get back as soon as possible to spate McKenzie, because if he comes out like that next week, they need to put Curse out there immediately. I think that will help tremendously. Like I said, maybe things could have been a little different for Hughes had he been a bigger guy. But having Curse out there is nice to offset that. Maybe, I know it's a completely different position from nickel to outside, but they need that size over there. I'm just going to say it, and I'm going to write this article this week. I think they need to bring back Sherrills. There weren't a lot of punts in this game, but the lack of any sort of yardage on punt returns from Hughes is disconcerting. I mean, Sherrills can help at the corner position if there's a complete meltdown, which there seems to be. Sherrills is always in an amazing position. He's just really too small to play. But he's such a good punt returner. He's the best punt returner this team has ever had. It's not like he's necessarily aged out of the position. I really wish they would bring him back. So stay tuned for that article. Cowboys are winning 44-15. Yeesh. I'm glad I didn't start Cooper Kupp in my I'm super close to actually making it to the finals or the championship in our fantasy football league that we do as a site. I've never done that before. I don't think I've even made the playoffs. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I've had 2 seasons. So I'll tell you this story and then I'll leave you guys. 2 seasons where I went undefeated and lost in the first round both times. Once was just a regular 1 round. One was 2 rounds, and I lost both of those rounds. But the best way to explain my complete just awfulness at fantasy football, I had both Randy Moss and Tom Brady in 2007. And I lost in the first round because the first round was they played Cleveland in Cleveland, and I think it was like 9-6. It was like all field goals. It was awful. I mean, but those two had games with nearly 100 points by themselves, more than once. It was awesome. But we'll see. I think I'm actually going to win this round, and I'll brag about my trophy that I'll end up buying myself if I end up winning against Deshaun, who also does videos on our Periscope. You should check those out because he's a great guy. He's got some great takes. Yeah, Randy says that. Are you talking about Hughes? You know, I just get nervous when he hasn't done anything to make me nervous. I shouldn't really label him that way, but I never got nervous when Cheryl's was back there, and he always turned nothing into something. And this team, especially in the playoffs, I can see Zimmer really reverting to some really conservative clock management, sort of field position, sort of game plan, like we had with Teddy, or really before Cousins got here and did things that a quarterback is supposed to do. And part of that is going to be special teams, obviously. And man, it would be nice. It would just be nice to have Cheryl's back or Patterson. I've been seeing him as a Bear, and although he irked me a lot while he was here, he has learned to stop smiling all the time. That was what bothered me, and it's really stupid. I know that, but he had the same expression on his face if he scored a touchdown, if he fumbled and the other team returned it for a touchdown, if he crashed his car into a school bus full of children. Like, he just always smiled. It's nice that he doesn't do that anymore. It's just it just rubbed me the wrong way. Randy says Hughes wants to run before the catch is secured. Yeah, I mean, he just, to me, it doesn't seem, he's had some iffy fair catches. But he just, I got to look up the stats. He doesn't ever really do anything. So anyway, I'm super happy, or relieved rather. I mean, I'm happy's a little much. Again, I don't think the score dictated how we all feel, but they won. So we'll just hope that they figure something out this week. They have an extra day. Monday night should be fun. I'll be back tomorrow, though, and I hope you guys tune in. Check out VikingsTerritory.com and purplePTSD.com for all the post-game coverage. I should have an article up here shortly, and Joe's got the game wrap, so that should be fun. Thanks, Tang and Randy, for stopping by, and Skull.